night one. Night one showed me how many unknowns I still had. So up until that point, as I said, I had done a bunch of other unique opportunities to Camp Pendleton to work on transition stuff. I'd already gone through the transition assistance program, the congressionally mandated 1 week just to get I did it once a year, or like 2 years out. And then I was going to do it again a year out to let it sink in fully, and, boots to business and a bunch of other different things. And I felt really good about LinkedIn and resume and how to dress, because I'd worked on all those pieces, and I walked in on night one feeling good about all of that. What I wasn't prepared for was talking about myself without saying Master Sergeant Halterman, or I have a sniper qual or a free fall qual, or any of those things, or I'm a Marine Raider. They're not. Marine Raider is what you did. It's not who you are. It's part of your persona now because you've done it long enough, but it's not who you are. And so night one, the staff, it's orientation night. Staff introduces, here's the curriculum. Here's who we are. Here's the curriculum. Now introduce yourself. And then he stops us. Joe stops us and he goes, but you don't get to talk about what unit you're with. You don't get to use your rank. We want to know who you are, not what you did. Ready? Go.
Hey everybody, welcome back. My guest this time grew up in a small town, and he went looking for adventure. He found it in the Marine Corps and eventually served 20 years in 8 combat deployments. About midway through his career, he made his way into the MARSOC community, but he'll tell you he wasn't supposed to be there, and he spent each day earning his right to come back the next day. He got out in 2018, and right place, the right time. He was offered a job with the Honor Foundation, and today he's the VP of Operations. Before we get into this episode, I mentioned in the previous episode that Noah Oliver from episode 55 is coming back. Noah is a Navy EOD veteran. He is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and he's also the owner of Flowhold MMA and Jiu-Jitsu Supply Company. If you've got any questions, Navy EOD, Jiu-Jitsu, owning a clothing business, please let me know so I can present them to Noah when he's back. But getting back into this episode, it's a great story with some great advice on transitioning. So let's get into it. Here's episode 130 with Michael Halterman. You just got, I guess, gifted a huge book collection.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and what's the extent of what the books are?
Yeah. So Vivian Galasso she's the honor woman of a group that was, I don't know, maybe last year, a year before. And her and I just kind of struck up a relationship. She's a former Marine who turned naval officer. And she was just a force in her class. And it's obvious why she's the honor woman. I mean, she takes care of everybody. She's a great leader, and she was just all in on the curriculum. And so we just kind of buddied up right away, and we've just stayed friends and tracking her through her transition. And her coach, they got very close. She's just Vivian's one of those people you just get close with, right? You're going to be best friends for life, and best friends with her coach. And her coach's husband passed away fairly recently, and he had a sizable book collection. I would say there's 200 plus. And you kind of don't, there's a lot of things when people pass away that you don't think about. What do I do with all of these things?
Right.
And you want them to go somewhere meaningful. And Vivian had gifted me all of her books when she moved, because she moved out of San Diego and was heading out to, I think out east. And she knew I was a reader, and I talked a lot about reading when I'm with the cohorts, because, reading really important stuff can really help you. And so she gifted me all of her books, and I've been working my way kind of through those. And then so her coach is trying to figure out, what do I do with all these books, and so on and so forth. And Vivian's like, we'll give them to Halty. And so it was just, it worked out in that way. And Yeah. And now I have 200 plus books, and they encompass everything from, and I'm calling it the Roy Bolton Memorial Library. And so now it's in my home. It's not its final place. I don't have a shelf for it. I mean, it's 200 books that I've just taken into my home, and I've literally, Sunday night, I spent most of Sunday night unstacking the stack and going, okay, here's everything pre-America. Here's world history. Here's World War I. Here's World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and just kind of down the list. And then he had this huge stack of Arctic exploration and Antarctic exploration, which is really cool stuff. I mean, that is, talk about going out to do hard things. It's not exactly a Spartan race.
Yeah.
Right? You're going out to do something genuinely hard. So a whole stack of those, probably 25 books on exploration. And then some more, there's like a random, like original, not original copy, but an old copy of Dune, and like an old copy of Flowers for Algernon. So these American literature, or 20th century literature pieces, you're like, oh wow, like this isn't in my collection yet, and it's something now I get to read with a different meaning instead of just picking it off a shelf. So now I'm trying to figure out, how do I mark all of these so that they stay cohesive in my collection. And as I read them, what I'm going to try doing going forward is, if there's a quote or something that is in there that I recognize that, and I post about it. So one, to Michelle for entrusting me with her husband's library, and two, it just feels like the right thing to do in memory of him. Yeah.
I think in 2024, less and less people are as interested in the tactile aspect of holding and reading a book. Mm-hmm. And so holding on to that tradition of physically turning pages and stuff is, I think, a really cool aspect. Forget the fact that just the subject material that you now have, at your disposal. Mm-hmm. Have you always been a reader?
No. My mom tried really hard to make me a gentleman, and part of that was to be a reader, and it didn't stick. I read a couple of fictions kind of in my mid-teens, and a handful of books here and there. And then you have the commander's reading list when you show up in the military and read these. And it really didn't open up to me until I read, I think it was, it's a Pulitzer Prize winning book by Andrew Carnow. Last name's Carnow. I might have the first name incorrect. And the title is In Our Image. And it's the history of America in the Philippines. And so I was in the Philippines. It was part of the reading list. And I was in the Philippines, working in special operations, working loosely out of the embassy, and interfacing with Philippine National Maritime Forces, helping them improve their capability of policing and how they use their gear, everything from the tactical level all the way through kind of good detective work and strings of custody and things like that. But I understood intuitively that I didn't understand the history of the Philippines. Right. And the culture. And then if you don't understand the history, you don't understand the culture and the why of the culture. And you don't understand perhaps why the relationship you have with them isn't as good as it could be, because you don't understand how they perceive you. So I jump into a Pulitzer Prize winning book, which is just a whole nother level when you read one than any other book you'll read. And it was just a great piece. It is a great piece of literature. And completely changed my understanding, thereby my relationships and understanding the culture with the forces and individuals, the humans I was partnering with. And that really opened my eyes to the power of reading for the very first time. And that became kind of where it all started. And that was probably 2013, 15, somewhere around in there, 2015 probably. Yeah.
From a centering aspect, do you, and I don't even want to say force, but do you carve out a specific time or a set time each day?
I used to.
And read?
And then I got a puppy and a 1-year-old German Shepherd. She's one now, does not allow for reading. She gets these fits of zoomies and I'm going to eat you. And so when we're trying to lay down in bed at night, she's like on the bed, off the bed, trying to eat me. And that used to be when I'd read for anywhere from 10 to 45 minutes, just kind of depending on sleep schedule and, and all those things. And yeah, So now that she's 1, because we've had her since she was like 8, 9 weeks old, or, pretty young, right? She was this little tiny burrito. And now she's 75 pounds. Anyway, so now she's starting to calm down in the evening.
But in her mind, she's still the 1 pound burrito.
Yeah, and she's on my chest and like in my face. So I haven't got my reading time back yet, but it's getting there. But I use, coming to see you is about 30 minutes. Going down to work is anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes, depending on traffic. And so I audiobook heavily. And that's how before the puppy, I was 30 to 50 books a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not wanting to jump too far ahead, but since we're talking about this right now, and I keep you on this vein, talking about the transition aspect, any books that you could recommend that somebody should read as it relates to transition?
Yeah, absolutely. But first, your mindset going into it. If you're not willing to accept some new information and be willing to make a change, doesn't matter what you read. Literally will not matter. With that mindset, the first books I would offer, and the one that was most helpful to me in my transition, was Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. And that is literally a Spartan kick into the center of your chest of a book, because it's going to teach you how you were lacking in bravery and not being courageous in your own home, in the relationships you have with your spouse, your significant other, with your children, with yourself. So I think it's a tremendous book to open you up, especially, and I say this especially for men. Women do this much more intuitively, at least in what I have been able to observe. And it's made me better in every aspect in every social dynamic I have now since reading that book, which absolutely helped during the transition, because transition is very much a social enterprise. We can touch on that later. And the second one, I would say, if you want tactical right now tips to improve your process for approaching, I'd say James Clear, Atomic Habits, because it overlays with everything in your life. And if you're process oriented, or you need a process to be process oriented, that's a great place to start. And I would say those 2 books in combination, regardless of which one you read first, those are tremendously helpful. And a bit of inspiration, the last one I'll give, and I'm blanking on the author's name, but Range. Range is just a tremendous book, because it opens up the idea that you don't have to be narrowly good at something to get into that thing. You can come with a range of knowledge and experiences, and then decide at any point in your life, I'm going to go that way and go do it. And that overlays into going from service into a job or career, or into higher education, or wherever you decide to go.
You mentioned Brené Brown, and that would definitely probably, as you described it, getting in touch with yourself and really, putting that mirror in front of you and getting to know who you are on the inside, rather touchy-feely.
Yeah.
Did you come to that book willingly, or did you kind of, I guess, resist wanting to read it?
It is not something I would pick off the shelf. It was a coach at the Honor Foundation that recommended it to me almost offhandedly. I had started kind of picking up my reading pace during the transition. I was going through transition at this point. And the coach and I asked the coach, hey, if you were going to, just like you proposed to me, what book should I be reading, essentially? And she was like, Brené Brown, you should read Daring Greatly. Just read that. And then she turned and walked away because she was busy, and it was and I scribbled it down real quick, and I went and found it, and I was like, this is not my usual, but okay, I'll give it a shot. And then, and that's why I prefaced with, if you're not willing to make a change and you're not going to be open-minded, it doesn't matter what you read. But I was willing to be open-minded. I was willing to say that I'm not sufficient in my current version, and there's things I need to take on. And so I took it on as if I was going to the range, as if I was snapping it with dry drills, if I was doing dry runs in the house. I took it on with that mindset, and that's why I was able to get so much from it, I think.
And for me, that's what I took from what you said most impactfully, is that anybody can recommend any book for you to read. Mm-hmm. It's not going to have an impact on you unless you're truly willing to take the words off the page and put them inside you, and really kind of let them, I'll use a washing machine, kind of rattle around inside you and really kind of look at how you need to change. When we're transitioning out of these careers, what we used to do is in the rearview mirror. It's what we're going forward to do, and being able to best be a part of regular society is a lot of it is getting inside of ourselves and realizing that, you know, who we are and how do we best adapt to society.
What things do I let go? What things do I bring forward with me? Yeah, all of it.
So let's take you backwards.
Yeah.
Where's hometown? Where'd you grow up?
Los Osos, California. It's on the Central Coast. You have to either accidentally get there because you're lost, or you have to navigate there on purpose because it's off the beaten path, if you will. It's on the back bay of Morro Bay, a very small town. Growing up playing sports, organized sports, a lot of soccer, a little bit of basketball, a little bit of, I think I did t-ball for 1 year, but didn't enjoy that overly. And a lot of outdoor time because it's on the Central Coast of California. So a lot of good weather. So hiking, mountain biking, and all those, and skateboarding a ton. Yep. Family
wise, brothers, sisters?
No brothers and sisters until I was about 16. And I have a half brother. And I have a stepsister, but no one kind of in the house with me from the early years.
And mom and dad, what'd they do for work?
Mom and dad are blue collar, hardworking Americans, grinding it out in various things. But dad specifically, 30 plus years in the oil fields as a heavy equipment operator, backhoes, graders, moving dirt. Yeah.
What took them up to? Because I mean, like you said, you're not going to find Los Osos intentionally.
Right.
What took your family there?
They both kind of grew up there.
Oh, okay.
Mom specifically in Los Osos. She has most of her life there. Dad kind of in the area. They moved around a bit, but the area is small. So it's like being in San Diego. Are you from Oceanside? Are you from Vista? It's all kind of San Diego-ish.
Right.
Right. So the county's small. San Luis Obispo County small, and dad kind of grew up all over it.
So basically then does everybody just kind of go, we're from Paso Robles?
Well, yeah, it's turned into that. And what I think is hilarious about that is I remember Paso when it still had dirt streets, when it was known for methamphetamines, not known for
wineries.
Wine. Yeah. And now when I go home and I see my dad, because dad ironically actually lives in Paso now and has for several years, seeing Lamborghinis on the street and just the total sea change that has happened. The boutique, really nice Italian food and boutique shops and all these different things. Like what happened to this? I mean, it's all good, but it's interesting.
What year did you graduate high school?
Wow, what was that? 1996 from Atascadero High.
And as you mentioned, you played a variety of sports. Did you play sports all the way through high school?
I did not. I decided to be a little bit of a troublemaker, probably in junior high, and really got away from sports. The only thing that really stuck the longest was probably skateboarding. But that kind of fell off, and I was just spending too much time trying to find myself and be with the in crowd. And yeah, I was just getting into mischief and really kind of a wayward youth, and by my own doing. I mean, it wasn't, nothing bad was happening in my home. It was just me being a teenage moron. Yeah.
Plans for college out of high school?
There were. Then I made my first failed attempt at college right out of high school. So why I graduated high school was probably because they're like, just get this kid out of here. And so they pushed me through. There's no reason I should have graduated. Thank you, Atascadero. And so I took that really poor student model I had created for myself, and I took that to the local community college and failed instantly. And it was a learning experience.
What were you thinking or what did you start studying? Did you have any plan for
tentatively
a future?
Psychology? That seemed like a direction I thought I wanted to go.
Well, as far from your parents' perspective, were they pushing anything for you?
Not so much pushing. Be more than you're being right now. You have a lot of potential, young lad. And they instilled in me both through by example and in extolling the being a man of character, working hard matters, and all of those things.
How does the military come on to the picture?
So I failed community college. My high school
no other options.
Yeah, my high school sweetheart and I break up, and my tiny world is falling apart in a tiny town. And I've got a couple of buddies, Tim and Neil, who were in high school ahead of me, one by 2 years, one by 1 year. So I watch one graduate and go into the Marine Corps, and I watch the next one the following year graduate and go into the Marine Corps. And I go down to visit them once or twice, and they look like they're just having a great time. And we're all still buddies, and I see a much different life for myself outside of Los Osos and outside of Central Coast. And I had a great life there, and it would still be great if I was still there. But I was young. I was a man who wanted adventure, right? The young man's adventure, to see the world, to travel and do all those things. And so I saw the opportunity of the Marine Corps, and I thought, and it wasn't patriotic at all back then, maybe a little bit. It was probably 70-30, all adventure and a little bit of patriotism. And I saw my friends having a good time, and I thought, if they could do it, I could do it. And so I decided to join, and I joined in the infantry, and I was off and running and found the adventure I was looking for.
Were they down in Pendleton?
They were down in Pendleton, yeah. So it was easy drive down the coast.
I was going to say, getting close to San Diego is probably not a hard decision factor either.
Not at all. And back then it only took, I swear it only took like 4 hours to get from Central Coast down to San Diego or Camp Pendleton.
Now it takes 4 hours to get through Santa Barbara.
6-7 hours. Yeah, easily.
Did you consider any of the other branches?
For a hot second, I would say a girl I was interested in went into the Army, so I considered the Army for a hot second. But I was always pretty sight fixated on being in the Marine Corps.
And what year did you enlist?
1998, September 1998.
And did you have a plan for yourself? What did you want to do when you went in? Did you have any idea other than infantry?
That was it. I knew I wanted to be in the infantry. I knew I wanted to do that because it was hard. And I had to fight for it a little bit, which kind of, I'm stubborn. So if you say I can't do it, I'm going to want to do it. And I had scored a good enough GT score that they're like, hey kid, you should really consider going into the air wing side. You could be in intelligence if you wanted to and all these other things. And I was like, nope, I want to be in the infantry. I had watched way too much Rambo, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, Predator, and all of those things during the 80s. Like, I wanted to go do man stuff, right? So the infantry seemed like the way to go do it.
Was there service history in your family? Mom, dad,
I had an uncle who was on my mom's side, who was in, I believe, National Guard, Army, and or reserves. Might have done some active duty time. I know he did Desert Storm, or a part of Desert Storm, I think. And then on my dad's side, my dad's father, my biological grandfather, but he died when my dad was like 5, really young. So I never got to know him. He was in World War II. And so there's a little bit of service in there, but it wasn't like a direct connection that I was able to observe. It was more my two buddies, and I got more from that.
From your parents' perspective, were they supportive of you going in the service?
Dad was immediately supportive. Mom was immediately anti all of it. I think she yelled at the recruiter at one point, "Get out of my house, leave my child alone." Like, Mom, I'm 18 or I'm 19. Like, I'm not your child. Like all those things were kind of happening. But she was also the loudest down front row center at my boot camp graduation, all in like moms do. Yeah.
How was the experience of actually standing on the yellow feet and kind of getting into it? Did you find that transition easy for you?
I appreciate that you framed it as a transition, because it's something I talk about a lot. It is a transition, but it was the chaos that I knew I wanted, but was totally unprepared for. And it was fantastic. I loved it. It was total mayhem. I got to learn a lot because my buddies had gone in and they told me this is what happens next, and then there's this and there's that. So I got a lot of the intelligence or download of information or the bro to bro talk. But there's a lot of little things that you just don't know, like what's it like to get, thrashed with however many other guys. I don't remember how many are in squad bay now, and all those other things until you experience it and you're like, this sucks, but it's pretty cool. It's really hard, but it's kind of fun. And you go through it.
Any point where you went, oh man, I made the wrong decision?
I don't remember ever having that. Maybe once I got to my first unit, I had one of those where I didn't feel like I was performing well enough. It was more of, do I belong here, as opposed to because I wasn't performing well enough, or because I didn't know that I was good enough to be there. It was never a like, oh, I've made the wrong decision because this place sucks, if that makes sense.
And you were kind of I'll call it a lull between the first Gulf War and obviously.
Absolutely. Peacetime all the way.
So what was your first duty station?
First duty station was like, hey, California kid, let's send you out to North Carolina.
Okay.
Let's do that for your first 4 years.
At least you go to 29 Palms.
100%, right? 100%. I totally agree. But I got really lucky because during that time period, the Marine Corps was trying to keep unit cohesion. So a huge chunk of my School of Infantry class that I had been around for the last 3 months, we all got orders to the same place together. And then another School of Infantry from the East Coast, a bunch of that, we all combined to show up at 2-8 together. So we're all young, brand new together with just NCOs who had been around for a while. And that made some kind of instant cohesion for us. So I've got I made a friend group of about 10 guys who I was really close with for those first 4 years and were instrumental in me really enjoying the experience and excelling in it, and all the friendly competition we had with each other and pushing each other to be better. And I'm best friends with a couple of those guys still. And they're like my go-to when, in the ups and downs and in all the things.
For you at that first enlistment, were you thinking one enlistment, I'll do my time and I'll get out and go do something else? Or did you have a long-term plan for yourself?
I always, for as long as I can remember, I knew I was going to do 20 years. Myself and one of my buddies, we were just those two guys who volunteered for everything. And I really learned from him, Jens, how to just laugh at any situation. It doesn't matter how bad it sucks. Just laugh. Just make a game out of it. Just make it fun. And I kind of learned that from him. And so we would compete with who could volunteer the fastest and for the shittiest thing to do. And so like literally go clean bathrooms, like go mop up poop, like whatever it was, go pick up cigarette butts. Like first ones to volunteer. So it made it fun. And we just kind of knew like, yeah, we're going to do this for the long haul.
Now, when did you first become aware of the special operations community? And did you know going in that was even an option, or did you find out about it once you were in?
I had no clue, right? I watched like Chuck Norris and Delta Force, and I watched Rambo, and Sylvester Stallone, and I watched all those movies, and I never connected the fact that those were potentially real live units that actually existed. My world was very small, and it was there was no internet back then. There weren't a lot of books that were nonfiction talking about those things. So me joining the Marine Corps Infantry, I thought was the pinnacle of those things. I had no idea until later on, like, oh, Charlie Sheen jumping off the Coronado Bridge. That's what that was supposed to, those are real places, real things. And it literally wasn't until I was in the invasion in Iraq and I watched a raid unfold that I realized that black helicopters of the government were special operations. Special operators were real. And I watched a raid happen and I thought, I'm really enjoying my first combat experience as an infantryman in the Marine Corps, but whatever that was, I've got to go do that. That was the coolest stuff I've ever seen.
So was it during your first enlistment that you even put in a packet or express interest in it? Or what's the process for somebody if they're thinking about wanting to get to that level?
I spent my first 3-4 years thinking that being a sniper in the Marine Corps, being in a recon in the Marine Corps was the pinnacle. And those were the things that I was tentatively looking at doing and was not making a lot of headway in that direction for various reasons during that time period. And I would say the biggest reason was my mindset was completely off. And it wasn't until 2003 when we did the invasion. So I'm into my second enlistment about, a year or two into it. And then I see a special operations raid happen. Later on, I get paired in a compound with a Green Beret ODA, and just how they conducted themselves, the gear they're wearing, the thought patterns they were using to solve problems, and getting that little bit of exposure opened me up to it. And then I come back from the invasion trying to figure out, what did I just experience? What was that raid? What was it for? Trying to find the books that are nonfiction that really talk about it. There's no Google in 2004. So finding anything on the internet was really hard. There's no SOCOM page that is public facing back then that I found. I didn't even know to look for it, honestly, back then. So then I just started asking lots of questions and trying to figure out what is this whole SOCOM thing. And once I figured out it was real and that it was not a possibility for me to get to in the Marine Corps, I realized I needed to take a different path. So I started looking for, do I do an inter-service transfer? Do I get out of the Marine Corps and join the Army or the Navy? What does that look like? And I started looking at all of those things.
You said already that when you first went in, you and your buddy, hey, whatever detail, we're the first to raise our hands. Mm-hmm. But then you said that, hey, I had an interest in recon or being a sniper, but I wasn't doing the right things. Mm-hmm. Where does those two things not meet up? Because it sounds like you were the first to volunteer, but yet you weren't doing the right things to get to recon or sniper. What was that about?
So I'm 5 foot nothing. I'm 100 nothing pounds. It takes a lot for me to put on weight and muscle, therefore muscle mass. Back then, I didn't understand nutrition. I thought, pounding a couple of 30 rack a night as a young infantryman in my early 20s and eating literally whatever and then get up and do a hike is like, that's just what you do. And I wasn't physically prepared. I was way underprepared. And because my mentality was too much drinking, too much partying, too much not focusing on what matters, and just not having the actual knowledge base to build myself up from there, I was in no place to get there.
Did you have access, looking back at that time, did you have access to somebody who could be a mentor or help guide you to where you needed to get to and you just ignored it? Or were there not as many people open to kind of guiding you to where you needed to be?
I had great mentors in the infantry who did make me a really good infantryman, but there was no one to kind of bridge the gap to the next big thing. When someone decides they're going to go be a sniper or be a reconnaissance Marine, they disappear. And they're on their own program, grinding it out, doing whatever they got to do to get to selection, get through selection, and then they're gone. And you really don't hear or see from them again because your operational tempo is now going this way and their operational tempo is now going that way. And you're not seeing them day to day. So you kind of lose track of them a little bit. There was one or two. Patty got over to the sniper, the stay teams, and he tried to kind of drag me along, but I just wasn't ready. I would ironically run into him at MARSOC a decade later.
And so you already mentioned that you considered doing an inter-service transfer so that you could get into the special operations community, but obviously you didn't have to make that. The Marines stood up MARSOC. Did you know as soon as they were standing it up that, hey, I'm going to go 110% and get to this?
I did. But the way it worked out, so I do about 5.5 years in the infantry, do the Iraq invasion, come back from that. I get orders because now I'm kind of mid-career. I've got to make a decision to continue my career, which means I have to do some things to build myself to be able to do that career-wise. So I've got to decide drill instructor, recruiting duty, and those different choices. Right around that same time, combat instructor had become an official, what we call a B billet. So you can build your career off that and continue along. I thought I have relative combat experience now. My experience as a student at the School of Infantry was not great. There's a lot of room for improvement there. I would love to go be a part of helping improve that. Ironically, I had the exact same thought when an entire cohort who also showed up at the same time had the same thought. So we got to be part of the wave of we're changing this place for the better. And it's happening while the war is like, oh, this thing's going to continue. We didn't win. This is grinding on. Why is this happening? So it was a really fortuitous time for me. My mindset had started to shift considerably then as well. Understanding nutrition, how to put on body mass, and all of those things are starting to line up as well. I had a great tour while being a combat instructor, worked with some of the best infantrymen and guys who were truly passionate because we knew that what we were doing was creating young infantrymen who were going straight into the fight. Like Fallujah had just happened. Like that's going to go down in history as one of the biggest, fights in Marine Corps history, at least. So we were very passionate. It was very fulfilling, but also really hard to watch those things unfold. So we worked very hard to make sure we were putting out the best infantrymen possible. And then right as I'm finishing that up, one of my buddies, close friends, gets by named by Force Recon company who's looking for infantry MOS guys to come over and be leaders under this new construct. And they're looking for more than just the by name. And, if you know anybody else, let us know, because we're looking for, potentially however many, 10, 20, 15, something along those lines. So I got by named also. So a buddy of a buddy, right? And that's only that only happened because I worked very hard. I was trying to show up every day being the best teammate I could be. And I had figured out those things as a young infantryman, like slow your drinking down, figure out your nutrition, get in the pool. That's a weak point for you. Get under a ruck. That's a weak point for you. And doing those incremental things and building structure around that, which allowed me to capture those opportunities when they were availed themselves to me. So my buddy said, hey, check it out. I can vouch for you one time, and after that, the rest is on you. So I'm going to vouch for you this one time because I think you're the caliber of guy, and you're a guy I'd go to war with. So you get this one. And I thought in that moment, yes, I'm all in. Let's do it.
Did your awakening, and I'll call it an awakening, come naturally, or did you have somebody in your ear going, hey, pull your head out of your ass?
Bit of both. I had a lot of really great leaders, even in my young time in the Marine Corps, who were just like, you're a moron. You have all of this potential and you're wasting your time. You're drinking too much. You're doing all of these stupid things. Why? You could be in charge of things, and instead you're just another number, another guy volunteering to clean the shitters. You're more than that. And I've always had really great leaders and mentors who have been like, dude, what are you doing? So it was a little bit of both. Like that starts to churn in the back of my head. And I saw some really good movement forward while I was a combat instructor of, oh, wait, this hard work is the realization of real potential. Like I could do this. So it kind of came together at the same time.
And how did you enjoy, once you were in the role of being the teacher or the instructor, and being able to relate to being a poor student? How was that for you?
Oh man, that's a great connection. I never thought about it that way, but intuitively, as soon as you said it, I got there. Yeah. I try and I still really enjoy one of the things I enjoy the most is the one-to-one, I'm with you and I'm going to help you, because as long as you're working as hard as you can, I'm going to give you everything I got. And I'm going to figure out the way that you learn to help you figure this thing out to get to the next thing. And it's anything, right? It doesn't matter what it is. And so I poured myself into being an instructor, and I really tried every different angle I could to approach the guys that were under my charge, to take them from I know nothing to being the best possible assaultman they could be, because that was the infantry MOS I taught, so that they could survive combat and maybe even thrive in it and learn to really take meaning and something more from it.
The reason I ask that is because when you're telling the story, I related to quite a bit of it, of being that kid back in high school. Not that I couldn't learn something, I just didn't apply myself. It wasn't of an interest to me. Give me the C or the D and let me move on. And what I found when I moved forward and actually crossed that bridge and found that I enjoyed education, got my master's degree, and then found myself teaching, especially at the college level, there was something about being able to relate to students who are struggling merely because they, like you said, they just learn a different way. And I found it so rewarding to be able to work with somebody and not just, I think some teachers, if they excelled, they were the 4.0, they don't understand the struggle sometimes. And they're like, just get it. And when you could put yourself back in their shoes of going, okay, it's not that they're not getting it. They're just not getting it this way. Let's find another way around.
I'm doing it wrong. There's no bad students.
No.
There's only bad teachers. And that's really hard when you level that at yourself if you're the teacher.
But it takes an awakening. It takes the ability to look at yourself in the mirror and go, how am I failing them? You know, I've heard the analogy that if you're yelling at your subordinates, you're failing as a leader because you haven't taught them what they need to do. So it's that constant introspection when you're in the role of a teacher or a leader. You got name dropped to the special operations community.
Yeah.
Did you guys know going in what it was being built out to be?
I did. I got a lot of initial information. We're on Camp Pendleton together. It's just like a 10-minute drive, 15-minute drive down the road. And my buddy B, thank you, B. You changed my life. You know, we just drive down the street, and he knew guys who were in the teams and the platoons at First Force Reconnaissance, and so we could just ask him all the questions and get all the information. And hey, this thing's we're gonna stand down. We're going to stand down First Force Reconnaissance. It's going to turn into a SOCOM unit. The construct is essentially going to be, we're going to have two DA teams, an SR team, and one platoon of trailers. And the trailers would consist of a platoon sergeant, which is what B and I were going over under the pretext of. And we would have a platoon of machine gunners and mortarmen and riflemen to essentially lock down targets, provide security, be drivers, be gunners, things like that.
And how many years in are you at this point?
Right around the halfway. I was right around the 10-year mark somewhere.
When you look back on it, or even at the time, did you feel old for this assignment?
No. It was the perfect time in my career for that to happen. I mean, some of the things we talked about earlier, my mentality, my mindset, all of those things had shifted. I'd grown up finally. My prefrontal cortex finally came online. I was not so limbic. And along with having combat experience, along with spending a bunch of time on an instructor platform and working one-to-one, learning, and all the things you learn about an infantry, any given subject, when you teach it, you have to learn it at depth. So I understood. And while I was there, I switched MOSs. I became a mortarman. So now I understood a completely different aspect of infantry warfighting. So now I have a broader body of knowledge. And then just because you're around all the rest of it, I got to spend more time with machine gunners and more time with all of these different segments. So now I have a much better and deeper knowledge of infantry tactics on whole. I was in close to the best shape I've ever been in. I was still progressing in terms of, I knew I sucked with the ruck. I got much better. I was terrible in the pool. I'd gotten much better. And so it was all grind plus right time, right place, plus knowing the right person.
Was the selection process for you able to get through it first time? Any hiccups, any injuries?
I was in that. I'm in this micro window of just pre-selection where they're binaming people over. I was never supposed to be an operator. I was never supposed to stay there.
Oh.
I was never supposed to get the MOS. I was never supposed to get the badge. None of that was supposed to happen. I was supposed to be an infantry platoon sergeant, and I would rotate out after 4 years, and I would have my kind of check in the box, and I would go back to an infantry company or a battalion and so on and so forth. And that was that. I decided as soon as I got over there, I wanted to stay, and I was going to do whatever it took to stay. And myself and B were of the infantrymen that came over, or of the very few who got to do that. Most of them got pushed out. I was too senior to go to basic reconnaissance course, which was at the time the selection criteria, because it was largely staffed by reconnaissance Marines. It was built on the backs of reconnaissance Marines. And so I didn't belong. I wasn't a reconnaissance Marine, but I was too senior because I was a staff sergeant, and basic recon course was like, no, we're not letting this guy in. We're not wasting a slot on a guy that does nothing for us and totally messes up the promotion stack for everybody else. So I respect that. I understand why they did that, right? There's nothing in it for them. And so the selection course had just stood up, or the precursor to the selection course. So I volunteered immediately to go, because I knew if I could get in and through past that, and I felt great about doing that I was set, and that the next successive steps, I was writing my own destiny. I went and I got medically dropped. I got injured on Nightland Nav. And they're like, yeah, you're good enough. You're doing fine. All your scores you're in the green on everything, but you're injured. So come back when you get healed. And not everybody gets a, hey, you get to come back. So
how significant of an injury?
It was enough that I was considering surgery. It was a right hip, like my psoas had swelled up to about 3 times it was supposed to be. And it was completely taking up all the space in my pelvic girdle. So I literally just could not move my leg. And to say it was extremely painful is an understatement. A lot of other sensitive parts down in that area that were extremely inflamed as well. So
is that an impact injury or an overuse injury?
Overuse. Yeah. Again, 5 foot nothing, 100 nothing pounds, 65 pound rough.
Carry this.
Yeah. So selection did its job, right? It got rid of the weak. I was the weak. But I got an invitation back. So the command was like, okay, like whatever. Up until this point, he was doing fine here. They pulled all my scores up until the point he got injured. He was doing fine. A platoon sergeant shows up, a new team leader. Back then they were called team leaders. New team leader shows up. He's a staff sergeant senior to me. He's a Recon Marine. He's a Hulk of a human, AJ. And he's sorting the woodpile very quickly. We hadn't really had somebody kind of in charge to that point just yet. And so he starts sorting the woodpile and he's like, all 10 of you, orders, you're out of here. All 10 of you, like, you're going to these schools, this. And he's just all these things, right? And he turns and looks at me and he's like, why are you here and what's going on? Again, I start kind of trying to tell him. He's like, shut up. And I'm just like, we're both staff sergeants. Like, what? I don't know if it was like a day later or 20, like, I don't know. I don't remember the time frame because it's been long enough. Essentially, he's like, okay, check it out. Are you healed enough to go to sniper school? I'm supposed to be on like bed rest. I'm like pending a surgery.
I'm fine.
That's your answer. That's it. Like, yeah, because in my head, I'd already done the math. If I say no to this, you're done. If I don't pass this, you're done. He's like, okay, cool. He's like, I'm going to get you orders. You're going to go to sniper school. He's like, you pass? He's like, look, pack all your shit. Because if you pass, you get to come back. If you don't pass, you're not even coming back here. You're just going to go straight to an infantry battalion. It's like, okay, cool. When do I go? It was a Friday. He's like, you go on Monday. Here's your packing list. It's this big, long list of stuff. I've got to build a ghillie suit. I've got to find MRE. Like, I've got to find spray paint, all these things. I was like, oh, I see what's happening. Okay.
This is a test.
This is a test. Got it. So I made it through sniper school. And only because I had an amazing shooting partner, Gummy Graber, wherever you're at. You were awesome. And Benno. The three of us really worked our asses off, and they drugged me along quite a bit because I was completely underpowered and I hadn't memorized internal ballistics, external ballistics, scope theory, and all of these things that I had to learn in the moment. And most of everybody else there could quote it while doing 8-count bodybuilders because they had been working on it for the last month or 6 months or a year. Yeah.
So you came back, and in getting through that, I guess where I'm going with this is, did you feel like you had accomplished at that point all that you wanted to do? Because I remember when you said you went in, I wanted to be an infantryman. Then you got this opportunity. You made it through sniper school. You're now in special operations. Mm-hmm. For you, would you consider that the pinnacle of your career?
No. Up until this point in the story, all I had done is earn myself to show up the next day. And that's how I took it from there on. All I was doing that day was earning my right to show up the next day. And because I never actually made it through selection, my entire life now has been about earning my spot on the team.
Got it.
Because somewhere inside of my psyche, I know I never earned it the first time. And so I'm still trying to earn my spot on the team.
Did you feel like a bit of an outsider the whole time?
Absolutely. In the initial years. It wasn't until after the first deployment. So another piece that'll help is I get through that, and they had gotten rid of all the 03. If you're not an 0321, 99% of them were pushed away. Orders here, there, everywhere. I was even one of the drivers who like drove a whole van load of E3s to an infantry battalion. And the commander took a risk and he said, I need bodies for Charlie Company. It's Charlie Company's first deployment. I'm keeping these 3. The rest are going away. But he took a risk on me and 2 other guys. the senior enlisted advisor who showed up, he was like the senior enlisted guy next to the commander, showed up. He does a formation on Friday, tells everyone to go away except for where's my two idiots, B and Halty. And so we're standing there and we're both looking at each other like, uh-oh, what's going on? Like, we've got everything. Like, we haven't gotten in trouble. He's like, hey, check it out. If you want to know who's talking shit about you, it's me. You don't belong here. You're not an 0321. You're not a Recon Marine. Neither of you are. So just make it easy for me. Fuck up so I can get rid of you. Because I'm getting rid of you. You do not belong here. So if you want to know who's trying to get rid of you, it's me. And we're like, okay, roger that. Thanks, Master Sergeant. We're young staff sergeants. But as soon as he walked away, B and I just looked at each other and no words were said, but I know exactly what we were both thinking.
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. You'll have to kill us for us to leave. We're willing to die for this. So we kind of smirked at each other and like, it's Friday, go get a beer. Like, whatever. Next challenge. Cool.
So how many total deployments did you end up doing between infantry and MARSOC?
8 deployments by the end of it.
And were you able to get through that without any other significant injuries?
I would say predominantly. I've always had terrible ankles. My teammates definitely have a story about me and my terrible ankles or two. Yeah.
Did you ever get an opportunity to go back into an instructor position at MARSOC?
I did not. No, I got towards the end of my time at MARSOC, and it was the decision point of accept orders. All orders for MARSOC lead to the East Coast, especially now because there's nobody on the West Coast, and go to that would have been the next thing in my career at the going past 20-year mark, but I decided to get out at 20.
So then let's start talking about your transition out.
Yeah.
Coming to it, you knew at 20 you were done. There was nothing that could have tempted you to stay longer?
There was a lot of temptation. It was almost a foregone conclusion I was going to get promoted to the next rank. It was the orders were going to a place where I was being given a lot of opportunity because I had proven myself enough, right? I had earned my next day well enough that I was being given a pretty good opportunity. And bonuses were kind of out there and all of those things, but I had already spent time in North Carolina, and it was time. And there were a lot of little nagging industries starting to mount up, shoulder this and knee that. The hip has always been a problem, and just all these little things. And spend enough time behind a desk doing enough TPS reports and filing them incorrectly and being told to redo them, and you're that far away from the fight, it becomes something very different, and it wasn't what I had envisioned for the totality of my career. And so it was a natural transition point for me.
So the tail end of it became much more of an admin.
I was working in the S3 shop, spending a lot of time on future operations, which I do really enjoy, but there is a long tail of a ton of work and then no tangible results for a very long time. You're posturing the force for long-term outcomes, which I really enjoy doing. It comes very, I would say to a certain degree, natural to me, but there's not a lot of joy or gratification in it when you're just changing colors on a PowerPoint to suit another command structure.
What would have been that one thing that carrot dangling out there that would have kept you in?
Put me back on a team. I would still be in right now if I was still on a team. Probably.
And so your plan for transition, did you have a plan for it? Were you thinking about it as it was coming closer, and what were you doing to prepare for it?
I started looking out for that, I would say, when I had a full enlistment left. So I had watched many of my peers and mentors ahead of me. Well, I should say all mentors and guys I looked up to ahead of me. I'd watched the transition process and it did not look great. So when I started trending towards, okay, this next enlistment, at the end of this is going to be a big decision point, and I need to posture myself for the decision point of getting out or staying in regardless. And so I started looking pretty early on. And then when I had 2 years left, and everything started pointing towards North Carolina, which was not really what I wanted to do with my life at that point. And knowing that there would be zero team time in my future. So I started doing the little weekend courses I could here and there with different opportunities that are on Camp Pendleton or anything on the weekend, going to networking and talking to guys that were in transition and all of those things. And as I got closer and closer and closer, the Honor Foundation was a repetitive theme that just kind of kept coming up and coming up and coming up. And so, and then I had one of my former commanders who I looked up to, one of my former SEAs that I looked up to, said, hey, you're doing all the right things, but you have to go to the Honor Foundation. It's going to put everything together. You don't even know what you don't know right now. It is the big step that you have to take if you're transitioning out of special operations, and it's a must. So that's what I looked at next.
Did you ever go back and get any college under your belt while you were in?
I have 2 more failed attempts at college, both online learning. Again, not the college's fault. Definitely mine is I had not, and I still have not found the subject that really captures me. And I refuse to do an arbitrary subject for a piece of paper that validates me as having a bachelor's degree in X. I'm trending towards one finally. And I'm tentatively looking at it again.
Prior to finding the Honor Foundation, you mentioned going to networking events and taking every opportunity you can to meet with and talk to those who were transitioning or had transitioned. Did you have a career or a industry that you were kind of leaning towards?
I tried to stay as open as possible and just be completely open, because another repetitive theme, I guess I would say, is you don't know what you don't know. And I really took that to heart, and I figured that, okay, there's a lot of space for learning here, and taking on new opportunity and so I was tentatively looking at, and I was around a bunch of other guys who were also very entrepreneurial. And so the idea of doing something entrepreneurial and potentially starting a company or being a part of a company that had just started sounded very exciting, very much the way my mind worked. So I was looking tentatively at that and kind of things that I felt safe in my wheelhouse. I felt good about fitness at that point, nutrition, and maybe something in that realm aligned also with tech. And, with the advent of tech from 2018 to now, I mean, all the different companies that were like, yeah, obviously, but they were just kind of brand new back then. The Apple Watch was kind of coming along. Aura just kind of come along. Whoop. I don't like 2019. No, maybe 2018, 2019. So I was in the right time, right place for kind of that idea. And that's kind of what I was tentatively looking at.
When you finally got into, because they do it via cohorts at the Honor Foundation. Yep. When you got into a cohort, what was the biggest eye opener for you in going through that?
Night one showed me how many unknowns I still had. So up until that point, as I said, I had done a bunch of other unique opportunities to Camp Pendleton to work on transition stuff. I'd already gone through the transition assistance program, the congressionally mandated 1 week, just to get I did it once a year, or like 2 years out. And then I was going to do it again a year out to let it sink in fully. And, boots to business and a bunch of other different things. And I felt really good about LinkedIn and resume and how to dress, because I'd worked on all those pieces. And I walked in on night one feeling good about all of that. What I wasn't prepared for was talking about myself without saying Master Sergeant Halterman, or I have a sniper qual or a free fall qual, or any of those things, or I'm a Marine Raider. They're not. Marine Raider is what you did. It's not who you are. It's part of your persona now because you've done it long enough, but it's not who you are. And so night one, the staff, it's orientation night. Staff introduces, here's the curriculum. Here's who we are. Here's the curriculum. Now introduce yourself. And then he stops us. Joe stops us and he goes, but you don't get to talk about what unit you're with. You don't get to use your rank. We want to know who you are, not what you did. Ready? Go. We all just went, wait, what?
I'm Bob, and that's about it.
Right? Yeah. No, I'm Master Sergeant Halterman, and I'm on. And it was really hard to do. But before anybody went, it was really hard to think about. But before anyone, he stopped everybody and said, don't worry. We know you don't know how to do that yet. It's why you're here. This is the most important part. This is what you're actually here to work on. Figuring out who you are, how what you did, it's not who you are. It's a piece, but it's not the whole you.
It's a big piece of us to let go of and walk away when we're in these careers. Looking back on you at that time, do you feel that you strongly identified with who you were, or in your mind were you just Michael Halterman?
A little bit of both. I was understanding that the transition having looked at it for a long enough time period, that it was going to be something that I was not used to in terms of mindsets, and I would have to take on new information, and I would have to be accepting of all of it and then filter it without having an immediate opinion of, no, I'm not using that. No, I'm not using that. But I have to let all of it kind of filter in and percolate and churn on it, right? Do some meditation, do some contemplation, do some journaling, have some conversations with people that have done it, have some conversations with some of the elders in my life. They've gone through transitions too, different ones, albeit, but transitions nonetheless. So I spent a bunch of time doing that. So I was much more accepting and just saying, wait, I made it through boot camp because I went all in. I made it as an infantryman because I went all in. Instructor, MARSOC, on my teams, all the things, because I went all in. Just go all in on this. So I did.
Before finding the Honor Foundation, was there any apprehension on your part about making the transition out?
To a degree. There's always going to be some. And if you're listening to this and you're in the transition, pre-transition, or you're anywhere in that sphere, that's totally normal. You can mitigate some of it, like I did, by being prepared and doing all the things that you can do, and just accepting new information and really allowing it to churn without just stiff arming it right away, finding what fits.
And what year did you get out?
2018.
And you're now with the Honor Foundation. So did you already have that lined up when you?
I did not. No, I had used all the skills that the Honor Foundation had taught me, and I was looking at renewable energy space. I was interviewing with a couple of companies. I had gotten myself pretty far in the interview process as one of the companies, and looking at a soft offer very shortly, and everything was trending positively. And then I got offered the opportunity for a new position that was opening at the Honor Foundation on the staff. And it was a technical problem they were trying to solve. And I'd been identified as somebody who kind of liked solving technical problems. And I make pretty words fairly well. And I'd gone all in with the curriculum. And so they said, we're looking for a director of virtual. And so we've never gone online before. It's a hard technical problem. Would you be interested in doing that? I was like, wait, you want me to stay here and help my friends and other special operators transition? So they go, yes, 100%, I'm all in. And so before I even had a job or even did the interview with the Honor Foundation, I had told the other companies I was pulling my candidacy because I was on a different path. So I went all in. I burned the boats. Wasn't a great idea, but I did it and it worked out.
Was the other company going to force you to relocate or allow you to stay in the San Diego
No, it was
area?
all local, excuse me. Yeah.
And was that for you? Was that a priority to stay in the San Diego area?
I own a home here. I really enjoy it here. Yeah.
So now with what you're doing with the Honor Foundation, and we talked about it briefly, maybe even before we started recording, talk about what this new aspect that you're bringing to the Honor Foundation for those that are transitioning.
So right now we are running a pilot course. So the Honor Foundation was formed, and the idea of it is to serve special operations military personnel in transition. And that is a hard subject all by itself to tackle. Tackling the 200,000 that get out every year is a parallel hard problem, but it is a little bit different. It's a parallel problem. And so now the Honor Foundation has been around for 10 years, and something that makes this very unique, other than only serving special operations veterans, is part of our curriculum is really helping you to dive into who you are, who your community is, how do you make sense of the world moving forward, and what is going to be your purpose, and how are you going to derive meaning from your life. And those are really hard existential questions that you've got to ask yourself that have nothing to do with the big long checklist that is required and necessary, but insufficient to help you properly transition. It has nothing to do with actually getting a job or your finances or any of those things. It really has to do with everything that's happening in your heart and in your head. We feel, as the Honor Foundation, that that is a small area that is not being completely covered for the 200,000 who transition every single year. So how do you do that at scale? And how do you do that for 200,000 potentially year after year to be able to afford to do it, first of all? So we can't do it with the model we have. That's unachievable. So you have to go online. Well, how do you do it well online? We all just came out of 2020 not that long ago, and none of us want to be on Zoom all that much and all of those things. It's not the way you want to learn. So we've been slowly kind of working over the last 5 years, most concertedly over the last 2 years, on how to scale it online and make it really a course that is not so condensed that you're just like clicking the button to get through, but they're really doing deep introspective work that is going to have tangible outcomes. So you're making decisions on careers and whatever's next for you with full knowledge of yourself and what makes you happy and what drives you, not the dollar signs, not what my buddy did that looks cool, not writing a book because is that success? Or not going to Goldman Sachs because is that success? Or to Harvard or something. Those are all arbitrary. Those are measures in somebody else's life. What's the measure of success in your life based on your factors with your family or whatever your situation is? So that's the area we're trying to work on. So we have a pilot going right now and we're testing it with about 100 participants. Does this material land with you? Does it make sense to you? What do we need to change? All the way down to the vocabulary. Are we using the right words? And it's a lot of flowery shit that big tough dudes don't want to grapple with. Like, who am I? No. Not rank and title. Who am I? And all of those other things. So that's what we're working on in a pilot course right now. We're hopeful that in maybe May of this year, we can look at doing an official launch. There's we've got to figure out business structure, totality of scaling, and all of those things. And those are all hard problems we're trying to figure out right now in the background as this pilot course goes through the curriculum. We'll take all of the information from curriculum. We have a pre-survey and post-survey. We have some PhDs looking at the material to make sure that it is scientifically sound, psychologically sound, and a couple of other things, metrics that are, that have real basis and metrics to them so that we can create the best possible course that transitioning veterans deserve.
And this would be a fully online or virtual program for them to go through? It is. And the way we're kind of bridging the gap with how do you get some sort of personal interaction? Because you and I, we're both soldiers. We're both getting out of, we're both admin clerks, but you're married with a couple of kids. I'm single, maybe you're mid-30s and I'm early 20s. We're having drastically different transition experiences and looking for drastically different outcomes. And so there's got to be a space and time for us to have those conversations. And so we're doing what we call community meetups. And so we log in about 3 times a week and have a live meetup. So everyone's kind of like on a Zoom call together. And we talk about, because we're trying to move people together through, it's not in a cohort, but we're trying to move people together kind of progressively. So if you're on chapter 3, everybody in the room's on chapter 3, and we talk about chapter 3 and how's it landing with you and how's it landing with me and how's that different? And it's okay that it's different. And how's it landing with her that's completely different and where she's stuck and struggling, or maybe getting through where you and I are stuck and struggling. And then we can start to help each other. And so creating actual community and working through it together, we're working through that, I think, with some live interaction that is scalable. Yeah. What's the vision for the duration of this?
It's program? About 10 weeks right now. And I say about 10 weeks because here's something nobody talks about in transition. It's not over the day you get a job. You don't just magically tick the last box on the checklist and you're transitioned. No, you tick the last box on the checklists and you've done change management and you've probably done a really good job. That has nothing to do with transition. Transition is in your heart and your head. It's how you are mentally and psychologically dealing with all of those changes and who are you becoming as part of that.
And you segued that perfectly, because that was going to be where I wanted to go next. So when you made your initial exit, transitioning into the civilian world, how did it go for you?
I had the softest landing ever, right? I went from having an amazing experience for 3 months at the Honor Foundation as a fellow. Now I'm an alumni. Now I got a job there. Mission, purpose, meaning, it's all there in spades, right? If we were playing spades, I'd have all of them. That doesn't mean that I have transitioned yet though, right? And so like the things that I'm talking about, the checklist and what happens in your heart and head, not only was I grappling with it as a faculty member trying to help my brothers and sisters through it, I was still grappling with it. And I would tell you right now, 5 years later, I'm still just getting to full transition of me. I mean, it was really only a couple of months ago where I'm finally comfortable being, no, I'm Michael or I'm Halty. Call me either one. I'm fine with that. But the past me really kind of is in the past now. And I'm totally fine with that. That took a while. So grappling with it together, I had a great transition, but internally, I was still dealing with a lot of anger. I was still dealing with, it started early on, alcohol. I was still dealing with a lot of those things because it worked in my past career. So why wouldn't I carry those forward into the next career? They weren't. It wasn't making me the best teammate.
Was the alcohol at the back end because of the perceived sense of loss of identity?
I think it was habitual. It was, I mean, it's so ingrained in the culture, especially during the time period. And being in the infantry, it's in the culture. Being in special operations, it's in the culture. And then just grappling with four of my 8 deployments were to combat zones, grappling with losing buddies. And now it's suicides. And I mean, literally last week. So it was all of those little things, and it becomes the crutch coping mechanism. And it's only, in the last couple of years, so I've really started leaning into meditation, contemplation, and those things.
Have you talked to anybody from a professional therapy standpoint?
I did a bunch of it during the transition. Is absolutely something I'd recommend. Especially if you're leaving special operations, you have a battalion psych, go see that person. It's 100% worth it. If you're in the big military, there are free options on base that I would absolutely recommend. There's a lot of free providers that are, because you're military, you can go get. And it's completely, and even if you're like, bro, I was admin and all these, like, yeah, I got it. Like maybe you think you don't need to, or all these things. It's just worth the conversation. And maybe you don't. Maybe you're totally fine, but it's totally worth the conversation. And so I did then. I haven't since I've been out. Just, you fall into the work's busy. It's fast paced, traveling a lot, family things. And you're like, me? Well, I've got the gym and I meditate and I'll get there at some point. So it's kind of where I'm at now. So that is me being open and honest about all the things that I'm talking about. I'm as flawed human as anybody else, and I'm working through them with everybody else, not a part, I'm a part of it, not, away from it.
You back on the skateboard?
Not yet. I go back and forth on that. It's a little bit of do you make it's like $120 now for a skateboard. So I don't know. I'm finding a lot of fun, having grown up in the outdoors. I love being in the outdoors. Climbing, bouldering is analogous to skateboarding for me, and is a challenge that I'm really enjoying right now. CrossFitting, my wife and I do it. So we have like a shared connection with it. How'd the workout go, and those things. And that's probably what I'm most into right now, physically.
Any last pieces of advice for veterans and making their transition?
I would say that the most important thing that you do is do not do your transition alone. Transition is a group sport. The reason you were so successful in your military career is because You're either surrounded by a bunch of like-minded peers who pushed you and helped you be better and helped you along the way. Had a couple of mentors who continued to help you along the way, or maybe all the way throughout. A couple of counselors or commanders or SEAs that were filling those roles. All of your success in the Marine Corps, or in the military, was done as a group. And we forget that. We forget that a lot because we get into the transition space and we think we have to do alone because it feels like you are separating from the group. You're no longer a part of that herd. The herd is headed in a different direction and you feel alone, but you've got to find your new community immediately. You've got to start figuring out who you are, but more importantly, who you're becoming so that you can make sense of the world because the world is shifting. Your community, everything that you know, you're pulling yourself out of that. And you've got to find your new crew who's going to help you get through it. Because when you isolate, when you spend too much time in your own head, this is not a challenge. I'm not throwing down a challenge, people. You're going to find yourself in some of the worst mental places you can absolutely be, and is not healthy in any way. It's not a place of growth. You've got to do it with a strong team around you. Find your team.
I appreciate your time and I appreciate the advice.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.